Maybe we should...
Put the dice away before I take them away.
Hi everyone, you're watching The Broken Meeple, a show devoted to board and card games. I'm Luke Hector.
And I'm his friend Jesus.
Got a little treat for you today. I talked about this game on my Essen podcast, where I mentioned a trick-taking game that Dranda Games showed me when I played some games with them at the Essen Fair, and I said, ooh, this was a pretty solid trick-taking game. I wanted to get my hands on it. Problem is, the person who brought it to the fair brought something like about 100 copies along and was giving away about like 20 or 30 a day, and it was nigh impossible to get hold of it because most of the people who had heard of it had already grabbed a copy, and the ones that were left had to queue for miles, even 2 hours before the show started, to get a copy of this. Screw that for a game of toy soldiers. No, I decided to just bide my time and accept that some games you're just not going to get. Then my little buddy gave me a little tip-off. My friend from Shirts and Merch Studio, you will have noticed their logo on the screen earlier, gave me a little tip-off that a site called travel-games.co.uk was getting a bunch of these Japanese import games in. They've got a bunch of them. They cost a pretty penny. I mean, this was like twice the retail value of the game. It cost a bit, but they're Japanese imports. You can get some cool rare stuff, like stuff from the Sashi and Sashi range, for example. And he showed me an Instagram post where this was said is in stock. So I went out and bought it almost immediately. I literally got on my phone, interrupted what I was doing. I think I was out at the time with friends. I just went, I am going to buy this now. I just got on with it. Sadly, they've run out of stock because I'm pretty sure the second that it was mentioned, everybody wanted a copy of it. Yes, this is somewhat highly sought after as a trick-taking game, and some of you are probably thinking, well, why? What is so special about this game? Well, I had to get hold of a copy and play it some more times to see whether my thoughts from Essen were solidified or have changed since, and now I can give you a full review of this game. Wow, thank you Patreons, you make this possible.
I told you, we're an anarcho-syndicalist commune.
Nokosu Dice is a Japanese import game, but there are English rules in the box, and essentially it's a trick-taking game like most trick-taking games, where you play a card and you follow suit and the highest wins, but there's a few little twists here. Firstly, you've got dice, which you don't normally find in any other trick-taking game to my knowledge. Lots of them, lots of cool little dice. You've got your cards, as you would expect, you know, your 0s to 7s in various different colours, you know, your standard suit cards. Okay, where's the twist here, Luke? Well, it all comes from these dice and what the trump is in every particular round. Every round plays out the same. You've got a little player board to sort of help you organise your dice, but what happens is, before the round starts, you'll get your hand of cards and you'll be able to see, let's see, I've got a bunch of purples, got a bunch of reds, not many greens, got a few high cards, that's right. You can make your evaluation on that. And then you get a random die out of the bag, and then a bunch of others are rolled, put in the middle of the table, and everybody drafts one at a time. It depends on player count, sometimes it varies, but for most games you will draft one at a time until you have got 4 dice on your little mat. And the idea is that you will then play through the round where your hand consists of the cards that you had at the start, so you already have these, and also your dice. Your dice can be played like a card in your hand, so this is a 3 yellow as much as this is a 4 purple, for example. But, you know, okay, that's pretty cool. You've got some public information and some private information, but again, where's this heading? It all comes down to how the round ends. The round ends as soon as everybody's only got 1 die left on their board. As soon as you've got 1 die, you can't play it as a card. And then scoring-wise, you get a point for every trick, but the die value of the one you've got left is how many tricks you are trying to win in the round. So if you've got a bunch of different numbers in front of you, I could be winning this round with 1 trick or 6 tricks, but depending which dice I play, I'm gonna finish up with a set where I like, all right, I now need to win with 3 tricks. You get a point for every trick, as I said. If you match the die in terms of number of tricks, you get a bonus 10 points for every other player who didn't match their last die. So I might only get 10 points because everybody did it, but then I might also get like 40 points, you know, on the basis that it's like, oh, cool, you know, everybody else around the table didn't match and I'm the only one. Ooh, bucket of points, please. And if you are fortunate, if you are desperate enough to grab one of these null dice, these black dice which basically count as zeros, you have to finish the round with those, and you are effectively trying to shoot the moon and go for 0 tricks. And if you do, you get an extra 10 points on top of all the other points. But there's something I didn't mention about the dice. When you're drafting from the middle, one of them is left over by the time the round ends, and this becomes effectively the trump for the round. So in this case, I've got a 2 yellow. Now, the trumps that you play function like most trick-taking games, so you play a trump and it's better than just playing with a card. But they are ranked in a specific order, so if you have a card that is specifically the 2 yellow, it's like a super trump. It cannot be beat. There's only one copy of every number and suit in the deck, so you are the one with that super trump. It cannot be beat. But then after that, if you have a card of the same number, that's also a trump. And then after that, if you have a card of the same color, that is a trump. But let's say I play a 2 red and you play a 5 yellow, my 2 red will still beat you because 2 is a better trump than the color yellow. So, they are ranked in order. So not a lot to describe there, and that's kind of one of the good selling points. This game is not a very difficult game to play. I've got the English rules here, and they only take up essentially that is all the rules of this game, and some of that is scoring and some of it is more just like, pictorial examples. Although because this is translated from Japan, there are a couple of weird grammatical errors on it, 1 or 2 spelling mistakes, but nothing major. I mean, you will be able to play this game from this rule sheet without any problems here. We're not talking as bad as I've seen some translations in the past. But these are all the rules that you need, and to be honest, once you've done that, you've got a very good rules reference card which tells you everything about how the round plays. So it tells you, what cards you got to deal. It tells you how many dice you draw based on player count. About playing the tricks, all the trump strengths that I mentioned before. All the rankings are at the bottom there, and then all the scoring. Everything you need to play this game is on this card. Once you've explained it from the sheet, you should never need to look at that sheet ever again. It's very straightforward, and if you're familiar with trick-taking games, you're going to pretty much pick this up no problem, because a lot of it is kind of familiar ground. You play a card, you must follow suit. A trump beats a non-trump, these things you've seen. So the real new nuance here that you've got is the dice and how they work. The fact that they're cards in your hand, and the fact that your die that you're drafting, that is left over, becomes something for the round, which is always a mechanic I love.
I admire its purity.
What this game manages to do is that it has a lot of little clever nuances to it that you don't really discover until you play through the first round. Because when I'm explaining it to you, you might be thinking, well, that doesn't really sound like much. But the dice make this game. If you took the dice out, you would just have a very plain generic trick-taking game which wouldn't really mean anything. But this is where it's at. Because, well, let me go over some of those nuances for you. First off, the mechanic of the die left over becomes the trump. Love that in any game where you draft stuff and one is left over. I mean, Pioneer Dice does it, Harvest Dice does it. There's all sorts of games that have that effect. Even I think Evergreen, with cards had that similar effect. Where you're taking dice, but you're always conscious of which one is going to get left over. Now, that decision already affects you because you've got a bunch of cards in your hand and you've taken some dice already, but you're thinking, well, hang on, are we going to get left with a 2 blue or a 2 yellow? Well, if I get left with the yellow, that's not so bad, but if I get left with the blue, I've got like no blues in my hand. What am I supposed to do? So do I take the blue or do I take the yellow, on the basis that I just want to shore up my yellows a bit more? You've got these little decisions just during the drafting phase. But on top of that, though, you've got to think, well, do I shoot the moon and go for this black die and see that I win no tricks? Could do. It's a decision. You've got 4 opportunities to decide, are you going to do that? So fine. And it is quite fun going for this, I must admit. But then you've also got the numbers on the die themselves, because you might think, well, okay, I'll take a bunch of blues. I'll do really well at blue. Okay, fine, especially if a blue is going to be left as a trump. But you got to think about how many tricks you're going to end the round with. I've just put 4 dice here at random. 1, 2 threes, and a 6. So I've got to play 3 of these dice before the round end, and I've got to consider, well, hang on a minute, that means I've either got to win the round with only 1 trick, specifically 3, good chance there, or somehow, if I get lumbered with that 6, win 6 tricks. And so, this gives you an element of flexibility as you go through the round, because you can play the cards and the dice in any order you like. And so you're thinking, well, okay, if I play cards, I can hang on to these dice for a bit longer. But dice are public information, so your opponents know that you have these in front of you as cards, and they can use that to their advantage. So you think, okay, I'll play some of these dice early so they don't know what I've got. Okay, I'll play that one, and I'll play that one. That should be fine. Oh, wait a minute, you've just played a blue. Uh-oh, I've got to play my blue one. Now I'm left with the 6. Can I win 6 tricks? I'm not entirely sure I can. You know, these little things come up, and there's a pro and con to playing your dice early or waiting to have that little bit of flexibility. But you've got to be mindful of whether you're going to be forced to play dice when you don't want to. These dice just add so much coolness to a game. It ups the cleverness to it, where you're actually actively thinking about whether you want to win a trick, lose a trick, stitch a person up specifically, or not stitch them up. And on top of that, you've got a little tiebreaker rule where if you happen to play cards and there's 2 people that could equally win, the person who played last is the one who gets the tiebreaker. So again, you're looking at the other people, and it's like, well, I've got to 7. Bad example, because dice don't go up to 7.
Yes, the number I was thinking of was the letter M.
Let's say I got a free red here. Okay, free red, that's cool. Oh, hang on, this will win the trick. But then my opponent's sitting there with a free red. So if I play the free red and they decide to play the free red, they'll win the trick. Oh, I don't want to do that. So it just really elevates this to a different level of, not complexity, well, I suppose it's complexity, but it's complexity in how to manipulate the game and how to do well. You know, this is not a trick-taking game where you just play a card and hope something happens to you that is good or bad. You have good information. You have some information, not perfect information, especially as one card is not dealt, you know, when the round starts, so you don't always have every single card in the round. You don't have every die in play, because yes, you've got all these dice here, but you only draw so many out of the bag, so some dice might get left in. You might have a situation where all the greens come out in the draft and there's only like 1 blue. It was like, well, maybe you can't have that, but I don't know. But, you know, you get what I'm saying. You could have lots of a single colour, very few of another. Well, okay, do I therefore draft the greens because there's a likelihood that green's going to be the trump colour? Or shall I take the blues and just say, you know what, well, shall I drown all the greens out so that the blues have a chance to be the trump? Lots of these little things, and it just really works.
Oh, it sounds dreamy.
The scoring also allows a decent amount of catch-up, because you can have a round, like for example, I've got a score sheet here. First round, 3 points, 5 points, 4 points. We played a free player. So we didn't actually get anyone matching in the first round, so we're all pretty even. Then 2 of us got 14, 13, and the other person got 5. So all right, we've got a very substantial lead over that other person. Third round, 7, 4, 21. They got a really good third round and suddenly propelled themselves back into the lead. You might get a situation where one guy just does continuously well and they're going to win the whole game. Fair enough, these things happen. But you can end up with a lot of these situations where somebody who thinks they're at the back can shoot the moon, go for that 0 trick bonus, or just do really well in one round and suddenly be brought back into the fray. And it kept things tense. Throughout that whole game, there was always a chance that any one of the 3 of us could win, despite the fact that at certain times it looked hopeless for certain players. It's a very dynamic scoring system, and again, that just leads to a lot more cleverness. The interaction with the players is also really cool as well, because it's not just you playing your own game. You have, as I said, public and private information. So you can see what other players have got in front of them, but you can also kind of gauge, well, hang on a minute, they just ran out of blues, so therefore they're not going to be reacting to blues. You've only got 2 tricks won, you want to get to 4, so you're trying to win a couple of tricks. All right, do I play into you, and like knowing that you're going to win this trick when I want to lose a trick because I don't want to win any more tricks? That could be cool, but then are you going to stitch me up if I try to stitch you up? It's like, and you know, you find that you're actually almost playing the players as well as the cards and the dice.
Wait, my cheating unit malfunctioned!
Because there have been times where I've decided, you know what, I don't think Andy's gonna, I don't think you're gonna shift that 6, are you? You're not. You're not gonna do it unless you're forced to. So you know what? I think I'll take a chance and play a card. And they don't, and I get off lucky. But then there are other times when you know that it's likely that somebody has only got one thing of a color left. Like the only thing they've got left in them is a green in front of them, and they don't want to play that die. I happen to have a nice little green in my hand here. You know what? I don't really care if I win or lose this trick, but in it goes. You are forced to play that 5 and you didn't want to. There's a lot of things that you can do with this. And, a lot of the trick-taking games are typically all hidden information. Like, you make guesswork. You play the crew, all the cards are hidden unless you do that little scanning mechanic. But then if you play other trick-taking games, typically you always have the cards hidden in the hand with no public information at all. Having these dice in front of you just, again, adds that little extra element. And this game is kind of like taking very elements of trick taking that we've seen before, and you're just cranking it up a notch. Not necessarily up to 11, but you're cranking it up by adding something cool. The game also doesn't outstay its welcome. The game will take you somewhere between 45 to 60 minutes to finish an entire 5-round game, depending on the number of players. So you're definitely looking at an hour with 5 players probably. You can get it in 45 minutes with 3. Depends how long people start thinking for. But the game is not necessarily restricted to 5 rounds. If you want to play the game a little bit quicker, just play 4 rounds. Play even 3, although 3 might be a little bit too swingy with the points. 4 is actually a decent sweet spot if you just want it to be a little bit quicker, but honestly, I've played this game with 5 rounds and it doesn't feel like it's outstaying. Even though the rounds are exactly the same in terms of like how they play out, it's still just so much fun. It's just a really cool thing. I want to get the new set of dice, and then on a certain round I get a new set of cards, and it's like another puzzle that you've got to solve. I've got these cards in my hand, they're mostly low, but I do have a lot of a specific color. So do I try and use that to my advantage and make that the trump with the dice, in which case I'm going to win a bunch of tricks, or do I decide at some point during the draft, you know what, the yellow's not going to be the trump and I've got a bunch of these low cards, you know what, I'm shooting the moon and I'm going for this black die. All these little choices, all these extra elements, it's just stuff like that. And I know I'm kind of speaking like a broken record here, but that is what makes this game. Now there are 1 or 2 little niggles that I do need to mention. The first thing is the player scaling. This game is only playable from 3 to 5 players. Well, good. This game wouldn't really work with 2, and I don't need some weird solo variant. 3 to 5, fine. This is actually one of the rare cases where I want to play this game with the most players. Playing this game with 5 is actually really good. And the main reason is because 3 players does have a lacking element. 3 players is still cool. You'll play the game relatively quickly and you'll still have 2 opponents to go up against and the turns will be quite snappy. But one thing I do notice with 3 players is that because you have more cards in your hand, people are less willing to take the black dice, the nil dice, because these are the ones where you're saying, I'm not going to win any tricks at all. Well, in a 3-player game, when you've got 10 cards, finishing with 0 tricks is incredibly difficult even if you try to work for it. It's very hard to do, which means a lot of the time these just simply don't get chosen. In a 4-player, it goes up quite substantially, and particularly in a 5-player game, when you've only got, I think, 8 cards in your hand, people are more than willing to pick up these black dice. And because there's only 2 of them, regardless of the player count, you are in a 5-player game more thinking about, oh, hang on, somebody's already taken one. If I want to take one, I better take it on my next die, but do I want to? I don't know. And so I cannot believe I'm saying this, but of all the times I say to people, don't play games with 5 players, this is actually a game that I say, yes, play this with 5 players.
What?
4 works pretty well. 3 is just, probably not the best way to do it, which is shocking to say the least.
I don't think any of us expected him to say that.
So it's no surprise that I like trick-taking games. What can I say? It's a mechanic that just, sings to me. It's a simple premise. It's something that's kind of tweaks a nostalgic itch in a sense, because I used to play with just a deck of cards and play trumps and various stuff like that when I was a kid. But the thing is that it's a simple mechanic that leads to some very cool, puzzly, short, quickie, filler, cheap games. And there are some that I absolutely adore. I mean, I can't get a copy of it, but I would love to grab a copy of Niet, which, lets you change up the rules of the game. The Crew has been one of my favorite trick-taking games ever, with that really cool co-op mechanism. I stand by that if you want to play trick-taking with 2 players, you must get Fox and the Forest, as well as the duet version, because those 2 are fantastic. And, I've even played 1 or 2 others recently, like Tricky Badger, which was a half-decent one from Essen. I like this mechanic, even when it's thrown into weird big board games, like, what was it, the King of Boro Boro, or whatever it is. Was it Boro Boro or Brian Boro? I can't remember. It was the one about the Irishman. I'll put a picture on the screen. But, that one combined area control with trick-taking. I thought it worked really well in that. It's just a mechanic that works for me. So, yeah, do I like this one? Oh, hell yes, do I like this one. I mean, I absolutely fell in love with it when I was at Essen. We played a couple of games of it, and Drandler Games showed me, I forget who actually owned it, but basically we were playing as a group, and I'd never heard of it, and I thought, well, I like trick-taking game, and they explained the rules, and I thought, okay, I mean, maybe we'll go with it, maybe it will work. And then in the first round, it clicked, and I realized I want this game. This is probably hands down the best trick-taking game I have ever played. This is going up against the likes of The Crew and The Fox and the Forest, which have been in my top 100 games. This game, I can wholeheartedly say, hand on heart, is, I think, the best I have done. And it's not exactly, you know, bringing in some weird ultra complex rule or, you know, throwing some craziness into the thing like Niet would, or maybe like the Dwarf King, but it's just taking like simple premises and just adding a little nuance to each, which then gives you lots of little clever choices, public and private information, the drafting of the dice, the die that's left over that does something for the round, you know, the constant sort of flexibility of shifting, you know, when do I play my dice and how many tricks am I going to end up with the round, and do I shoot the moon and go for that? You've got a bit of everything in this game. You've got dice, cards, shoot the moon, last die left over, public, private information, a little bit of subterfuge, a little bit of bluffing, you know, a little bit of stitch up here and there. You know, it kind of got everything, and yet, even though it is a Japanese import, which means it's going to be a bit hard to find and probably not the cheapest game in the world, it still gives you a decent amount of dice, some good cards, a rule sheet that's easy to learn, very good reference cards in English and Japanese. I mean, I can't read anything on the Japanese side, but, you know, if you want to learn basic Japanese, well, here's a good starting point, I guess. It just ticks every box. Everything it tries to do, it does well, with my niggles being absolute nitpicks. You know, the free player game is not as good as 4 and 5. Fair enough, I'll play this with 4 or 5 players. The fact that it is so hard to find good 5-player games is the fact that, you know, one of the reasons why this one is just going to fill such a good niche, on the basis that now I have something that's going to easily slip in my game bag and be played with 5 players if we've got about an hour to spare. And everyone I've shown this to, I've so enjoyed just watching it click, where they get that same feeling I did, where it's like, I don't know if this is working, I don't remember, and then they start getting into it, and then by the end of the round, you know, they're going, that's really cool, another round please, and then by the end of the game, they're like, why can't I get a copy of this? And believe me, I know your pain, because I had the similar thing. I've got no choice. This is getting a 10 out of 10. I think it is fantastic. You know, it is just such a cool concept, such an easy tweak to a system that already works, but what it does, it just absolutely nails it. It puts in some of my favorite aspects to some games like trick taking, last die left over, you know, bluffing and subterfuge, and combines it all into a brilliant little package. I mean, trust Japan to get this sort of thing right. And to be fair, I like buying a few little games from Japan and Korea and, you know, Taiwan and a few of those, because you do get some really cool little gems here and there. Remember Vegetable Stock I've talked about in the previous video? A tiny little Korean card game. Probably one of the best micro game fillers you can get in terms of what it needs to do to tick the box. Seriously, give the Asian market a look sometimes, because it really is, you know, packed full of cool little titles, of which I barely scratched the surface on them. I mean, I don't tend to hunt them down typically, but occasionally one comes by and I'm like, oh wow, that is clever, I want to do that some more. And so, you know, you get these little gems. But yeah, 10 out of 10. I think it's fantastic. Best played at 4 or 5 players, still find it free, best at 4 or 5, and if you love the genre, you have to try and get this game. Although, of course, I'm a reviewer. I have loyal Patreons, of which I am thankful for. I can get a game at twice its retail value for review purposes, okay? I'm not telling you to go and buy this at inflated prices if it's out of your price range. Only do so if you've got the cash. But if you happen to be at Essen, you see a copy there, or if you're able to get a Japanese import of this, or if by some fluke they bring it out in English, then by all means give it a shot. You can, I believe, create this game by cannibalizing other stuff if you really want to. There's a little card game called Stick 'em Up, I think, or Stitch 'em Up, or something like that. If you get the cards out of that and then buy a bunch of these cheap dice off Amazon, you could probably create, you know, this game out yourself. There's a runaway die already. So by all means, do whatever you want to do. But I love it. It is in my collection, and I am going to watch it like a hawk, because it is not leaving for some considerable time.
You're not sleeping with it, are you, Ray?
So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Check out the rest of the content on the show. I haven't done a huge amount lately, you know, birthday in April and stuff like that, but there's plenty of videos there for you to watch, so if you're falling behind, now's a good time to catch up. Let me know your comments, you know, what trick-taking game is your favorite? Have you had the chance to play this? Do you know a good source where you can buy this this at non-inflated prices, I think that would be a good thing to share among the comments actually. You know, ease your ways to get this, because my way was fluky and a touch expensive, but you know, thank you to Shirts and Merch Studio for giving me the tip off on that. I can't thank you enough. Until next time, remember, regardless of whether you want to play your tricks with cards or with dice, it's still only a game. So take care and bye for now.